Hello everyone. Topic for today's discussion is the diaphragm. So what are the learning objectives for today's lecture? Introduction, extent of diaphragm, what are the external features of diaphragm, its attachments, various openings, nerve supply, blood supply, functions of diaphragm, and finally the applied aspect. So what is a diaphragm? It is a thin fibromuscular partition between abdomen and thorax. It is basically a dome-shaped musculoaponeurotic partition which is intervening between abdominal and the thoracic cavity. We can say that the diaphragm is forming the roof of the abdomen, and the thoracic surface of diaphragm is convex on the right and left sides in the form of two domes, the right and left domes, and it is depressed in the middle, which is that part is the central tendon. Scapula of the diaphragm is at a higher level as compared to that of the left one, which we can see in this slide, which is showing the extent of diaphragm. So the right copula extends till the level of fourth intercostal space in normal breathing and to the level of fourth rib in full expiration, whereas left dome is one rib lower. And what is the excursion of diaphragm? In quiet breathing it is 1.5 centimeter, and in deep inspiration or deep respiration it is 6 to 10 centimeter. So here we can see certain external features of diaphragm, that it has two right and left domes, also named as cupula, and it is a muscular partition, so the muscle fibers, they are inserted in a fibrous central tendon. So it is the convexities are there in the area of domes, whereas there is a depression in the center of diaphragm. Coming to the very important part, that is the attachments. First of all, we will discuss the origin of diaphragm. It has three sites of origin because it has to arise from the entire circumference of thoracic outlet. As we can see in the diagram given on the side, that how the diaphragm is originating from the entire circumference or the periphery of thoracic outlet. Origin is divided into three parts: sternal part, costal part, and vertebral part. Sternal part, it takes origin from the inner surface of xiphoid process, as we can see in this diagram, whereas costal part, as the name suggests, it arises from the ribs, inner surface of lower six ribs and their costal cartilages, right? The vertebral part or the lumbar part, which is the posterior site of origin, it requires special mention. It arises from three sources. Number one, from a pair of crura, right and left. Right crura, as we can see in the diagram, is longer and more muscular. It arises from the front of the bodies and the intervertebral discs of upper three lumbar vertebrae. Now, why it is more fleshy or more muscular? Because it has to do more work to displace liver during inspiration. Whereas the left crus arises from the body of upper two lumbar vertebrae only, and both these crura, they are connected across the middle line, as we can see in the diagram, by a ligament which is known as median arcuate ligament, right? So both these crura are uniting together to form a central arcuate ligament, that is the median arcuate ligament. Another set of ligament which gives origin to diaphragm is medial arcuate ligament, as we can see in the diagram. And this here we can also appreciate one muscle which is lying medially. It is psoas major muscle. So what is medial arcuate ligament? It is basically a thickening of psoas fascia, that is the fascia covering psoas major, and this medial arcuate ligament is attached to medially to the body of L1 or L2 vertebra and laterally to the tip of transverse process of 5 lumbar vertebrae. And the lateral arcuate ligament is the thickening in the fascia of another muscle which is known as quadratus lumborum. As you can see in the diagram, the muscle is arising laterally placed quadratus lumborum, and this lateral arcuate ligament is attached medially to the tip of transverse process of first lumbar vertebra and laterally to the lower border of 12th rib. After attachments, let's talk about the various openings which we have in the diaphragm. Now, this diaphragm is not a complete separation. There are certain structures which are going to the abdominal cavity from thorax and certain structures which are coming from abdomen to the thorax. For that purpose, the diaphragm has been considered as a passage for certain structures, and how these things are passing, how these structures they are passing through from the diaphragm. So by the means of certain openings, right? So openings in diaphragm, they are either major openings and we have certain small openings also. So the most important opening we start is the vena. Major openings, there are 3 in number. Number 1 is the vena cava opening, number 1, which lies at the level of 8th thoracic vertebra. So IVC is coming from the abdomen to the thorax, right? And then it is draining in the right atrium. Here we can see in the diagram that how this IVC it is penetrating, or it is passing through the diaphragm at the level of 8th thoracic vertebra. Along with IVC, there is passage of right phrenic nerve also through the same opening, through the same vena cava opening. So, opening is the esophageal opening. It lies 2 vertebrae below, that is at the level of T10 vertebra, and it provides passage to the esophagus. Then, along with the esophagus, right and left vagal trunks, right? So these are the nerves, the right and left branches, and then the esophageal branches of left gastric vessels, which will supply esophagus and certain lymphatics. So these are the structures which are passing through the esophageal opening. Now the vena cava opening was in the central tendon of diaphragm. Esophageal opening, it lies in the muscular part of diaphragm. And vena cava opening, in some books it is given that it is quadrilateral in shape. And what is the effect of contraction of diaphragm and vena cava opening? The vena cava opening, it dilates whenever the diaphragm contracts. So the more blood it enters the right atrium. And esophageal opening, it lies in the muscular part of diaphragm at the level of T10 vertebra, which is this opening is elliptical in shape. And you can see various structures which are passing through the esophageal opening. Coming to the third major opening, that is the aortic hiatus or the aortic opening. It lies, basically it is lying behind the diaphragm, and it is osteoaponeurotic. It lies at the level of lower border of 12th thoracic vertebra, and it is round in shape. It is basically situated behind the median arcuate ligament. It is basically the space behind the median arcuate ligament. And what are the structures which are passing through this aortic hiatus? 3 structures: abdominal aorta, thoracic duct, and azygous vein. Important mnemonic to remember these major openings of diaphragm is VOA, Voice of America. V stands for vena cava opening, O stands for esophageal opening, and A stands for aortic opening. They lie at the level of 8th, 10th, and 12th thoracic vertebra. Right? So, Voice of America is to be remembered to remember the major openings in diaphragm. So, apart from the major openings in diaphragm, small openings are also there.
as you can see in these diagrams given below. Superior epigastric vessel, we are starting from the anterior side. They pass through the sternal, between the sternal and the costal origin. Subcostal nerve and vessel are passing posterior to lateral arcuate ligament, as you can see in the diagram given on our right side. And then we have sympathetic trunk. It passes posterior to medial arcuate ligament. Then there are certain structures which are piercing the crura. They are splanchnic nerves and left phrenic nerve. It pierces the left dome. So these are the minor openings of diaphragm. So coming to the relations of diaphragm. What lies superior? Lung and pleura, related with the dome of diaphragm. And pericardium, it lies on the central tendon. Inferiorly, we have the abdomen obviously, so it is lined by peritoneum. Right dome is related with right lobe of liver, inferiorly right kidney and right suprarenal gland, whereas left dome is related with fundus of stomach, spleen, left kidney and left suprarenal gland. So these are the relations of diaphragm, as we can see in the diagram given below. Right side we have the liver, and then we have on the left side we have stomach, spleen and left and right kidney, on either related with the corresponding dome of the diaphragms. Coming to the nerve supply, phrenic nerve is the motor supply of diaphragm. Phrenic nerve has a root value of C345. Now why the C345 root value is there of phrenic nerve? Because diaphragm initially develops in the cervical region or in the neck region, and when it descends down, it carries its nerve supply with it. So the root value comes out to be C345. This is the same root value of the supraclavicular nerves. So motor supply is by the phrenic nerve, and the sensory supply, the central part of the diaphragm, is supplied by phrenic. Sensory supply comes from phrenic, whereas the peripheral part is supplied by the somatic nerves, that is the lower intercostal nerves. Blood supply is by the pericardiophrenic artery, musculophrenic artery and the inferior phrenic artery, which are the these are the branches of internal thoracic, and inferior phrenic is a branch of aorta. Action. The most important action is that in the inspiration we have already seen, it increases the vertical diameter of thoracic cavity, and it has also the role in the certain actions whenever the abdominal straining has to take place, like vomiting, micturition and parturition. So prior to all these actions, diaphragm it contracts, and it also forces blood from inferior vena cava to right atrium. So it acts as a thoraco-abdominal pump, and it has been also considered as a weight lifting muscle. So let's discuss the most important action of diaphragm, that it is the important muscle or the principal muscle of inspiration. What happens is that, as we can see in this GIF, that when the diaphragm is contracting, lower ribs, they are fixed first of all, and the vault of diaphragm, it descends, as we can see over here. It results in the increase in the vertical diameter of thorax. And what happens is that because this diaphragm is descending, so it pushes or displaces the abdominal viscera, and as a result of which the anterior abdominal wall, it also bulges forwards to accommodate the various viscera, abdominal viscera. And when the limit of bulging is reached, the central tendon of diaphragm, it becomes fixed, and on further contraction, the lower ribs, they are also elevated, which result in the increase in the AP and the transverse diameter of thorax. So this is how this diaphragm serves as a principal muscle. In this diagram, we can also see the same, that how the chest is expanding during inspiration and how the diaphragm is contracting, and the opposite, it happens in exhalation. Coming to the clinical correlations of diaphragm, the most important applied anomaly or the applied aspect which is related with diaphragm is the hernia. You already know that hernia is the protrusion of viscera through normal or abnormal opening, right? So the diaphragmatic hernias, they can be acquired or they can be congenital. Acquired are further divided into two types. One traumatic, second is the hiatal hernia. So hiatal hernia is further classified as rolling or sliding hernia. This hiatus refers to the esophageal hiatus, right? So if this hiatus or the esophageal hiatus is weak because of certain reason, then this will result in rolling or the sliding hernia, and then the stomach or the intestinal content they can protrude into the thoracic cavity. Congenital diaphragmatic hernias are of four types. One is Bobdalek's hernia. It is very important and it is the one which occurs because of the deficiency in the pleuroperitoneal membranes, and it is also known as the posterolateral hernia. Second hernia is the posterior hernia, which which is occurring whenever there is a deficiency in the development of dorsal mesentery of esophagus. Right. So then the third is retrosternal hernia, which occurs whenever the sternal part is deficient, and this foramen of Morgagni, which is considerably enlarged, it results in hernia. Then we have central hernia also. So these are the various types of congenital diaphragmatic hernia. First of all, we will discuss the acquired hernias, acquired diaphragmatic hernia. In these diagrams, on the left side we can see rolling type, and on the right side we can see sliding type of hernia. This rolling type of hernia, as you can see in first figure A number, that there is a peritoneal sac which is present since birth, right? So if there is such kind of sac is present, that is congenitally, then what will happen, that this stomach can protrude into this sac. It will go from the fundus of the stomach will go in this sac, and the cardioesophageal junction will remain in its position, right? So there is a weakening in there is one ligament which is known as phrenicoesophageal ligament, right? If there is some problem in this ligament or there is weakening, then what happens, that the stomach goes in the hernial sac. This is rolling type of hernia. Here we can see that cardioesophageal junction is in its normal position. It is not getting disturbed. Second type of acquired hernia is the sliding type of hernia. In this, what is there? From the inferior surface of diaphragm, the fascia is reflected towards the esophageal sphincter, and if this esophageal sphincter is weakened, right? If this hiatus is enlarged, it can be because of obesity, or it can be because of certain types of operation. If it is there, then the stomach is just pulled up through this hiatus, as we can see over here, and this hernia is known as sliding hernia, right? And the stomach, it just herniates in the thorax, and it is associated with the regurgitation of acid or the heartburn like symptom. Patient presents with heartburn, right? So the lower esophageal sphincter or the this cardioesophageal junction, it is disturbed in this type of hernia. So this is the slide where we can compare the rolling and the sliding type of hernia. Rolling is the congenital and rare variety. Sliding is acquired and it is more common. Rolling occurs because of peritoneal process in front of the upper part of stomach. Sliding occurs due to the weakness of phrenicoesophageal membrane caused by obesity or surgery. And cardioesophageal junction is unaltered in rolling type, where it is disturbed in case of sliding type of hernia. Congenital hernias are due to the defect in development of diaphragm. Most common type of congenital hernia is Bogdalik's hernia or the left-sided hernia. We already know that diaphragm is mesodermal in origin, and most of its part it develops from septum transversum. But there are actually pleuroperitoneal membrane, they are also contributing to the formation of diaphragm. So if there is any deficiency in this pleuroperitoneal membrane, it will result in Bogdalik's hernia. In figure number B, we can see that how the intestinal contents, they have protruded into the thoracic cavity and they are compressing the lung. Right, so this is Bogdalik's hernia, and it has to be uh, it is a grave type of situation, and it has to be repaired as soon as possible, and it is usually left sided. Second type of congenital hernia is the retrosternal. In this, what is there? Foramen of Morgagni is present behind the sternum, sternal origin of diaphragm. Whenever the muscle fibers, they are not originating from the sternum, there is a gap, substantial gap, and through this gap the abdominal viscera, they can herniate into the thorax. This condition is known as retrosternal hernia. So this is another type of congenital hernia. And here in this X-ray picture we can see Bogdalik's hernia. It is usually affecting the left side. This blackish area, the bubbles, they are because of the intestinal loops which have herniated into the thorax. And here we have the dilated loops of bowel within the right hemithorax, and also the CT scan. So shoulder tip pain, it is occurring in pathology of diaphragm because the phrenic nerve and the supraclavicular nerve, they have the same root value C345, right? So if there is any problem in diaphragm or any pathology, it will be referred to the right shoulder tip because of the same innervation. Trauma can occur in diaphragm and it will result in difficult breathing. Coming to the development of diaphragm, most of it we have already discussed in the development of body cavities. Diaphragm is a mesodermal structure and it is a composite origin. It develops from four sources. Anteromedian part, it is derived from the septum transversum. Anteromedian part is derived from septum transversum, which is mesodermal partition, and it extends from ventral body wall to the ventral surface of esophagus. We have already discussed how the septum is initially cervical in position, then it descends, and it carries with it its nerve supply, right? Posterior part of the diaphragm between esophageal and the aortic opening is developed from the dorsal mesentery of esophagus. So septum transversum is forming the central tendon part, and the peripheral part develops from the body wall, and there is a triangular gap between the dorsal mesentery and the septum transversum. This gap is filled by pleuroperitoneal membrane. And if there is any deficiency in this membrane, then Bogdalik's hernia will result. So by the combined contribution of all these four structures, the formation of diaphragm, it's there. Here we can see after folding what happens. The septum transversum, it assumes a caudal position and it is situated between the developing heart, below the developing heart, just above the developing, and this is extension of septum transversum, that how it descends up from the neck region. It assumes its thoracic position and it divides the abdominal and the thoracic cavity. It grows in a transverse plane. At 5th to 6th week, it is invaded by the myoblast and they carry their nerve supply with them, which is coming from C345 nerve, and that is the reason that it is supplied by phrenic nerve. By 8th week, it is angled downward, and so that its front lies at the level of T7 vertebra and back it is at the level of T12 vertebra. So in this diagram we can see the contribution of septum transversum. This red color structure is septum transversum, that it is forming the anteromedian part, and these arrows, they are in the pericardio-peritoneal canals, which is enclosed by the pleuroperitoneal membrane, and purple color part is contributed by the body wall, and the posterior most part is where we can see the foregut. It is contributed by the dorsal mesentery of esophagus, right? So septum transversum does not extend up to the posterior most point, and it leaves two open passageways on the right and left side, which are nothing but the pericardio-peritoneal canals, and they are closed by pleuroperitoneal membrane. And if there is any defect in this process, it will result in congenital diaphragmatic hernia, as we have seen earlier. and this will result in the protrusion of abdominal content into the pleural cavities and interfere with the development of lungs. This finishes off with the lecture. Thank you.